Hi, today we'll be reviewing generative AI enterprise use cases, a survey of the industry. This session is based on a meetup that was recently delivered by us. The link to the meetup group will be in the description. We host bi-monthly sessions delivered by experts. My name is Jonathan Yarkoni. I come from a background in software engineering. I recently spent 6 years at Google heading the AI and ML specialists. And 6 months ago, I left, set up my own generative AI consulting firm. What we'll learn. So, this is not a technical session. This is not an exhaustive list. This is not a how to. You will not learn how the implementations were done. This is a survey of the industry. We read over 100 articles, big companies in the NASDAQ and such. And we will discuss at the end some takeaways, trends, frameworks, and statistics. How this session will be built. 90% of the time, this is going to be a grocery list. If you feel that some of the content might be less relevant to you, since this is a recording, feel free to jump ahead. We have tried to batch the use cases up by a category of industry, starting out by pharma, HR, online retail, and so on and so forth. At the end, we'll discuss things such as key takeaways, and last but not least, quickly, we'll be reviewing implementation strategy that you can use. Generative AI. Everybody's talking about it, but not so many people are doing it. Recently, a paper was released by Gartner. We are already 1 year into the revolution of ChatGPT, generative AI. Everybody's familiar with it, and yet only 5% are actually using it today. By 2026, more than 80% of enterprises will have used generative AI APIs and models and or deploy generative AI-enabled application in production environments, which is up from less than 5% in 2023, as I mentioned. This is a study by Gartner. By the way, all the links that you see down below, if you want them, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to share them with you. Enterprise automation is ripe for the taking. This is just a study from the iTex group, and you can see it's divided up by industry, where everything that's colored, not gray, is potentially at some degree can be automated by LLMs. The gray part is not, because it's not technically a language task. Yes, we are moving towards multimodality, and even that might be covered, but even if you don't take that into account, LLMs are very much poised to revolutionize enterprises. Okay, enterprise usages can be split up to two. On the one hand, there's development, which is what we'll try to focus on today. These are things that you are developing within the organizations, whether it's features or product in-house. Some example of those are chatbots, which answers FAQs, content generation of articles, personalized marketing, and code generation. Tools are an entirely different talk, which we'll be not reviewing today. An example is NoteTaker. There are many different magical Fathom, Win AI, which go into your meeting with you and record and take out key insights. That's just one example of a tool, which is definitely a productivity enhancer. The talk today will not be focusing on that. Use cases. Let's begin. Before we jump into what companies do, I just want to level the playing field and explain to you briefly some of the categories that you'll be seeing. Every use case that I'll be reviewing, I'll telling you, oh, they did content generation, they did automation, they did personalization. So I want to review them briefly. Content generation. Content generation, as it sounds, can be used for a lot of things. I just gave a few different examples here. Brainstorming for idea generation, automating content creation, enhancing existing content, and creating visuals, which is gaining more and more momentum as very powerful models such as Midjourney V6 are being released, and soon video. Going to be a very interesting year in terms of creative use of generative AI models. Automation. Automation can really be a lot of things. A few things here. You can use them to connect disparate processes, such as connect emails from one supplier address found in the supplier's table in Postgres, send these emails to a service after doing some PDF data extraction. A lot of things that we're seeing with customers is migration of rule-based systems. So let's say you have a very large rule-based system that's sort of like this decision tree filled with boundaries and heuristics. A lot of people are taking that partially and moving it to AI models simply since it works much faster and is easier to maintain and can also reach a higher accuracy. Personalization. Personalization is not new. It's been around for a long while. And this, again, is just a very small example to show you what I mean. So, non-personalized example of an outreach mail or cold mail is, "Hi, come buy your discounted goods, buy." This does not take into account anything. You could send this mail to anybody and you wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be very persuasive, but you wouldn't really hit the mark, so to speak. Personalized or hyper-personalized email, as they're starting to call it now with generative AI, it looks something along these lines. And this is a basic example. "Hi, Tom. Don't miss out on this limited edition hockey stick. Here's the link. Best." There's a lot that goes into this email, even if you don't see it. Things like the date, when to send the mail, the time, past transactions that Tom specifically had made, Tom's profile from where we can extract some of his maybe preferences, his age. Maybe we can deduce some things from the photo, usage pattern, if we're an online retailer and Tom is actually subscribed or using our store or the website, so on and so forth. We can now take all of these things and use them in order to really take personalization to the next level. Code generation. This is a very widespread use case. Most programmers I know today are already using at least ChatGPT in some capacity. We can also see statistics like Stack Overflow really diminishing in searches over the past year. Some things that you can do with code generation, obviously, first of all, you can generate code, you can generate tests, you can generate documentation, and more, it's also able to debug. Definitely ChatGPT is one of those, since it has in the background the ability with Code Interpreter to actually not only write code, but also run it. Very, very interesting. Text generation, it's the low-hanging fruit. Basically, the most basic thing, example that I can think of is summarize this text, or which generate, summarize this text for me. Anytime I write text generation, I basically mean prompt engineering. Okay, let's dive right in. Amgen, first company that we'll be reviewing. This company is from the pharmaceutical industry and they are doing drug design. What they're doing is basically generative biology, which means predicting the structure of protein folding. If anybody's been following closely, DeepMind has released AlphaFold 1 and AlphaFold 2. Highly interesting use case. Yeah. The next is they are modeling the human immune systems to be able to better predict how effective some drugs might be. Stitch Fix. This is a marketing example. They made use of text generation with heavy use of prompt engineering. A few things that I found interesting about this use case. First of all, they used GPT 3.5. This was for cost reasons. Second of all, they didn't try to bite off more than they could chew. They started incrementally. First, they went for generating ad headlines. They did this by extracting keywords and then finding relevant keywords in an embedding space and then generating a few different suggestions. Once they figured this one out, they tried to do description. It didn't work using the same method. They ended up using fine-tuning techniques and then solving it. As happened in a lot of use cases, human in the loop was involved. They didn't take it end to end. And also they mentioned that it was very much fun and inspiring to use the system. I talk about this briefly in the end, where I talk about removing the shame. A lot of times we know this from educational systems where kids are now using this in order to cheat, so to speak, on essays and on homework. But the approach should be different. You should actually encourage your employees to use these systems. They are productivity enhancement, they are accelerators. You shouldn't put shame or degrade people for using these systems. You should actually see how you employ them. And I thought it was very interesting that first of all, they used it, and second of all, they very much encouraged their people to use it. Last but not least, this actually ended up beating human creation. They did a blind test and they saw that the new systems that they created were actually better than what they had before. DoorDash, huge online retailer, especially in the States. They did a few things. Chatbots, they help customers to better purchase things by generating templates. They did improve discovery by adding suggestions. And they also created a application for the employees to increase their productivity, personalization, more content regarding more content regarding merchandising. And last but not least, they also have an idea around image generation, which hasn't yet reached production, but they want to enable restaurants who do not have photos of their menu items to quickly and efficiently generate images. Walmart did a lot of stuff, both customer facing and employee facing. First is Copilot. They used Copilot to create a agent assist customer support. You'll see this throughout the talk that Copilot is a very much recurring theme. A lot of companies are taking this as their initial dive into generative AI, and customer support as well. They have seen a lot of success with their customer support. They also did Copilot, which is customer facing, voice to shop and text to shop. They improved their search capability for things like use case based. I'll just give an example of that so you all know what I'm talking about. They enable things such as, I want to search for a unicorn themed birthday party. Before, if I wanted to buy things which are unicorn themed, I had to search for plates which are unicorn themed, cups which are unicorn themed, and balloons. And now they have enabled it to be around a use case. So they figure out that you're looking for a birthday party, which is on the theme, and they'll already bring up things like plates, cups, and balloons, which are relevant. The second thing is complex searches. Here again, I'll give an example. Let's say you want to search for an age-appropriate cell phone that is also compatible with a specific wireless provider. Last but not least, they are doing text generation. They want to help people make a decision faster, so they are doing summaries of all the reviews. Next up, we have Walmart's employee side. Here again, they went for a Copilot, which basically helps anybody who's on the floor in the store itself. They have store maps, they have price lookup, product locator, store sales information, and even things such as like birthday and anniversaries of employees. Very easy, very low risk, very beneficial, and they've seen a lot of success. Whatnot. Whatnot is an example of an automation. They had a fraud detection system, which was again a very robust decision tree, which they simplified and migrated to use a model. They were able to take many more sources into account, such as the entirety of all the conversation, the user engagement history, what kind of attachments they had, things such as the profile and age. Just think of things that you could do with it. And we are all familiar that, profiles which maybe have less information or don't have a photo are probably more likely to be dubious. It's not that automation wasn't possible before, and it's not that you couldn't take all of these things into account and put them into an actual ML model. Definitely you were able to. It's just become much simpler. If before you had to write all these systems and you had to standardize the data, today you can just think of each data source as a JSON and merely concatenate all of the JSONs together and ask the model to predict something. I'm not saying that this will work. I'm not saying this is, your end goal, but I'm saying you can start very easily. Again, here they used approaches such as human in the loop. They wouldn't ban an account based on the model's output. they would output a recommendation that maybe this is fraud, and then a human would take a look at it. They upped their precision up to 96%, and overall buyer satisfaction increased. Next, we have Honeycomb. Honeycomb are very interesting. They are doing a use case which I expect to see much more of in the next year, which is text to query. Something a lot of companies want right now, but is not so easy to do. I think what they did is interesting because they didn't go the entire distance. It wasn't exactly a text to query. They did text to UI. Okay, so basically they use the text as a enabler for UI. This allowed them to kind of mitigate what a user could do, and also curve things such as hallucinations. They had a heavy focus on prompt engineering, again, a recurring theme. And I'll review this at the end where I tell you, most of the use cases state flat out that they had a lot of prompt engineering involved. And you should probably go and learn prompt engineering yourself. And they mentioned specifically here that prompt engineering is a rabbit hole and that you best learn it before stepping into a project. Second of all, they had to use either GPT 3.5 or Claude because GPT-4 was simply too slow. Yes, GPT-4 right now is the best model on the market. However, there are cost and latency considerations at the time of this recording, at least. Moving on. Nextdoor. I was not familiar with them, but I think they had a very prevalent use case. They are a social network in the United States. They focus on neighborhoods. They did text generation around email specifically. The interesting things that they mentioned in the article is that good generation really requires authenticity. You have to think they relied heavily on things such as role. Hallucinations are definitely an issue, which is why they had to use things such as output parser. They mentioned the process, which again heavily relies on prompt engineering. And the interesting thing I think here is that they were able to reduce the cost by more than 99% by using caching. ThoughtWorks. Very interesting use case because it's both research and applied in a very unique way. What they did is they built a system for product managers which implements all kind of product discovery and product generation frameworks. And as you see, they're just listed here like a creative matrix and strategy ideation and content generation. Again, they didn't let product managers use ChatGPT directly, but they built a system which is kind of an enabler similar to what Honeycomb did before. Some of the things that they saw are that UI really helps. And they mentioned, don't mistake ChatGPT for being the right interface for everything. An LLM in and of itself is not necessarily a product. Other things is they heavily relied on roles. They use JSON output and some others. I really recommend reading this article. I found it very insightful. Morgan Stanley, company that most of you would probably be familiar from the banking industry, another research use case. They basically helped banks' internal analysts better search records and summarize them. They boosted analysts' productivity by 23%. If you don't have search within your company, you should probably think about it. It's become much more easier and the systems are way better. This is not a specific company. I've simply listed the title of this slide as banks since there are a lot and they're mostly doing the same thing. Here, most of them have chatbots and they're all, again, aimed at customer service. Just to list four, even though there are many more. Capital One has Eno, Bank of America has Erica, HFDC has Eva, and Santander has Sandy. Salesforce. Salesforce started early. As soon as the generative AI boom came about, they immediately started shelling out features. Einstein, I think, was announced just mere couple of months after the boom of ChatGPT, and they've been going hard ever since. They've been building a Copilot, which allows you to write emails, digest, get insights. It's not to say that you couldn't build a better generative AI capability on top of Salesforce or any other CRM, but it definitely goes to showcase that there's a lot of value that you could give your customers very quickly. You don't have to make everything perfect. The second thing they built is a platform. They understood that people are using LLMs, and a lot of the time they want to train LLMs using their own data. Since the data is already in Salesforce, they've built Einstein Studio, where they allow you to actually build your own model. Search, text to query, they also made an acquisition of narrative science around that area, and text generation, they have Slack summaries. Airbnb, again with the Copilot customer support, one thing I'll mention here is that they actually A/B tested against a business metric. We had a session a couple of weeks ago discussing how to evaluate your systems. It's not always that easy, and it requires some setting up and also understanding of the material. But there are a lot of business metrics that you're already familiar with. And if you just test against those, sometimes you'll simply see an increase in the business KPI. Let's say you're trying to increase conversion or revenue. Yes, it will be hard to fine tune really granular stuff such as prompts, but the overall system can easily be gauged against a business metric. And they have done some interesting things around personalization. They built the attribute prioritization system. This is interesting because they're helping hosts better understand which amenities they should offer by analyzing their data at large, but also looking at different hosts' photos and understanding from those photos which amenities they might offer, and then recommending them to other less successful hosts. Booking, Booking are doing an AI trip planner that you can chat with. This is again widely talked about in the industry. Most already believe that Booking and Airbnb and all of those sites are gonna shift away from focusing on a single booking to focusing on the entire experience, which ties into the next thing. They're trying to give more personalized recommendation on where to travel, and they also have things like flights and cars already. And last but not least, again, code generation. It must be said that I don't mention every company that does code generation. I just, the ones that are kind of blatantly stating it, I'm saying it. I think anybody who's I will say in most industries, you should consider code generation. Netflix, search, but not the search that you're thinking of, or not the search that you're using as an end consumer. This was actually an internal system to help their editing functions intro the organization. They use some very interesting things such as multimodality. And what I wanted to highlight here is that they weren't shy about using existing tools out in the open, such as an existing embedding spaces. And since they were already running on Elastic, they simply used Elastic because Elastic has vector search capabilities. A lot of times I work with customers and they have different databases, and they're like, okay, now we need a specific database in order to do vector search similarity because we want to do RAG, because we want to do embeddings, because whatever. You don't always have to do it. Elastic has it, Postgres has it. If you're already using those databases, you should probably stick with them. Again, the main thing that you should be thinking here is, how can I prove value sooner rather than later? And if I don't have to build everything from scratch, and if I don't have to migrate my systems into a new systems, probably be able to do it faster. iCIMS. iCIMS are in the HR space, again, building a Copilot, which helped create interview questions and follow up based on the candidate's resume. They also helped optimize job descriptions and also helped users build varied career path. Very basic use case, but again, it's not about building the perfect solution. It's about bringing value to the product. And they were able to do it very quickly with a low risk solution and some value. Workday, a much bigger HR tech. They built a very, very robust Copilot. You can see all of the things that it's doing here. It's doing much more than we specified about iSIMs in the previous slide. It's already going into reviewing contracts and recapturing missing funds. Interesting use case. If anybody wants to read through this again, send me an email. It will be in the description and I'll be happy to share. Adobe. I wanted to list some creative use cases because I don't think it's discussed widely enough. And I think 2024, again, with Midjourney V6 and Pika Labs and all of the new models being released by the various fundamental model creators, it's going to be much, much more. Adobe with Firefly, they are allowing image augmentation, everything from text to image, generative fill, which allows you to alter a certain area within an image, to text effects, recoloring, and some other very, very cool features. Coca-Cola, another incumbent which has been playing very seriously in the generative AI space. They have done not only but also things in image generation, video generation, and audio generation, which I wasn't able to find a lot of those. They were very early on, I think it was March at the beginning of the year, they created a video advert together with OpenAI. They created billboard campaigns which were generated by, again, DALL-E's model, and things such as user-generated campaigns where they allow them to both create images, which they then all used, and they allowed them to create music in the Coke studio. And last but not least, they also did some personalized holiday cards using image generation. Autodesk is one of the coolest use cases I could find because they are both creative, but in a very practical way. They built a system for creative exploration where you can design something, and then using generative AI together with prompts, the system will actually go and explore similar conceptual designs, and you can use it as kind of an aiding tool in order to better explore. I found this use case super cool. Cisco and Cisco text generation, they have their WebEx, which is their meeting system. Very, very, very basic features such as catch me up, key points and action items, highlights. Again, with the Copilot for customer support and Copilot for code generation for their security systems, such as implementing things such as text to policy. Last but not least, we have Datadog, which again have opted for the Copilot solution. This one is customer facing, and it basically helps customers resolve issues much faster. Next, we'll be discussing trends, stats, and some takeaways. So first of all, this is a diagram where I took the leading use cases that we saw. And this is based on the 100 plus articles that we've read in order to create this session. And you can see the leading use case being Copilot, followed by customer support, not mutually exclusive, search, content generation, and code generation. Very much up there with almost 50% of the companies at least stating that they're doing code generation. Next, we will be discussing some shared concerns which were mentioned by many companies. First and foremost is the data privacy and security. When working with AI systems, you'll be handling vast amounts of data, and everybody mentioned privacy and data security as being paramount. Misinformation and ethical concerns. There's a very easy way to create content, be it text or be it images, and it looks very realistic every day we move forward with the technology, and it's very easy to create some uh, misleading and unethical photos and text. Dependency and skill dilution. Uh, People are very much concerned that if we over rely on AI and AI tooling, it would lead to a decline in skill set within the organization, together with a decline in critical thinking abilities. Mm, Unintended consequences. We mentioned that there's a problem where somebody might use the tool not for its intended purposes. I think I mentioned it when I mentioned Honeycomb, where they had the text to query. One reason where they did the AI instead of enabling a chat or putting an agent is because they saw a lot of people trying to prompt inject the system, and they didn't want to fully expose it. Governance and regulation, very much not a standardized topic yet. If you've been following, you see that the EU recently released something, and the United States has already released several documents giving guidelines, and it's in high talks whether to do it together with big companies or not to do it with big companies. Highly debated. Hallucinations are an issue. Everybody knows this. Black boxing. We don't know how some of these models work. OpenAI specifically, they've told us some things about how they've trained the model, but not the entirety, and it's definitely not open source. Copyright and misuse. Just from last week, we had New York Times suing OpenAI for having allegedly stolen all their content and now creating content which is very much similar in nature to articles on the New York Times. Not the first lawsuit, not the last lawsuit, but definitely an interesting one to follow. Lastly, prompt engineering. I mentioned this a couple of times where companies said that they relied heavily on prompt engineering, and that prompt engineering is a rabbit hole which hasn't yet been standardized. And most companies, even if they didn't mention, have hit this wall. Some of our key takeaways after, well, being in the industry for almost 6.5 years, past year focusing mainly on generative AI, and having reviewed over 100 use cases that we went through some here. If you're just starting out, start with an internal use case. A lot of people are doing it, and for good reason. It poses less risk for the company. Copilot, again, is a very much safe bet because you're not committing to a value proposition, but more aiding the user, giving them some suggestions which they might utilize and might not utilize. Customer support feels like a very low-hanging fruit, where a lot of people think that there can be extraction of value very quickly. It makes sense because you could go and build easy systems such as FAQ. Simply feeding your FAQ document into a chat interface could probably resolve a lot of tickets being opened. Which brings me to my next point. Features are okay. Your objective is to bring a value to your product. Your objective is also to further generative AI penetration of the organization. And if you take really lofty goals, I'm not saying you won't achieve them, but it will definitely take time. If you take very small baby steps and prove value within the organization, whether it's to the product, the business function, or whoever you're working with, you'll probably be able to do much more in the coming year. You don't reinvent the wheel. If somebody has built a tool, or if there's an API which either does what you want or does part of what you want, use it. I've shown a few use cases here where companies which are very capable and carry a very large budget still chose to use external APIs, and I would recommend you do the same. Creativity, up and coming. OpenAI talked about this in their dev day. We'll see much more of that in 2024. Human in the loop Very good best practice. Build a system, but don't fully deploy it automated end to end in production. Have a human look at it at the end, incorporate it into the flow. Last but not least, can't stress this enough, learn prompt engineering. We have another lecture on the channel pertaining to prompt engineering. We'll be uploading many more resources regarding prompt engineering to the channel. Start getting familiarized with the topic. Implementation strategy. So we've split this up into two parts. First is the framework. When we work with customers, this is the framework that we use. I won't deep dive into it. You can see it here in front of you. Very roughly speaking, we go through this flow of selecting a use case, aligning the business, assessing the risk, analyzing the build versus buy. Again, coming back to if somebody's built this, don't build this on your own. And then rinse and repeat. We take into consideration a lot of things such as privacy, how do we do it by design, enterprise grade security, user controls, governance, usage policies, and so on and so forth. But this is a very good framework to make use of. Second of all, if you just want to get started, I built a small playbook of how I think companies should do this on their own. First of all, empower a cross-functional team. Enable that team to have a direct line of communication to an executive so that they can push things. Not for no reason, it's a cross-functional team. They're going to be involving a lot of function, be it a business stakeholder, data engineers to get all the different data sources, product people. That's why it needs to kind of have the right mandate within the company. When I started early on programming, I remember this sentence by a good friend of mine saying, nothing really takes an hour. And when we're talking about generative AI and when we're talking about big companies and bringing something to an already existing product, I would say a good target for an MVP is around 2 months. Don't try to rush something out the door within a week or 2 weeks. It's most of the times not going to work. Do weekly check-ins. Think in a change management plan way. If your organization is about to undertake this new thing called generative AI, perhaps you need to do training sessions, enablement sessions, talk about it more. Have people use ChatGPT or ChatGPT-like systems so they realize the value. And last but not least, empower the use of AI. I mentioned this in, I think it was the Stitch Fix use case at the beginning of the talk, where at the end of the day, it was fun and inspiring to use the system. Try to remove shame around generative AI. It's not a hack that enables you to not do your work. Quite the contrary. It's a hack that enables you to do your work much better. And you should very much be advocating the same thing within your organization. Empower people as opposed to putting shame on it. I'd like to really thank everybody. I hope this was very informative. If anybody wants to get the full list of 100 plus articles, feel free to shoot me a mail. If you just want to discuss something relating to a generative AI opportunity, we're here for you. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter for more content. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. We will be uploading weekly content. And if you want to join the meetup, again, the link is in the description below. Thank you very much.